Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent, also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois.
This week in the news, do top colleges favor applicants who are extremely wealthy? An article by Scott Jaschik from Inside Higher Ed. Mark and Anika will discuss, why should I try to avoid changing colleges? Our question from a listener is, how do admission officers review twins in the college admission process? Our interview is the final part of 3 parts interview with Julia Hutchinson, the Wisconsin high school senior, who will discuss a creative approach to learning what the students are like at the colleges on your list. And our college spotlight comes to you from the state of Texas, the recently crowned NCAA championships in a runaway, Baylor University.
Okay, friends. First of all, I have to start with a shout out to my oldest daughter, Karis, and my wife, Anitra. So my oldest daughter, Karis, turned 25 since we last recorded, and then my wife had a birthday as well. And so I want to shout them both out, but I also want to do this in the context of, I want to encourage everyone out here who's struggling, who's going through some tough times. I'm going to get pretty personal and tell you a little bit about our background. So Anitra is one of these people who just adores babies, adores them. Any baby that she sees on TV or whatever, or walks by, look at the cute baby, and she wants to pinch the cheeks. So she always really wanted to have kids. And the first time she got pregnant, we had a miscarriage. So that was really tough. And then the second time she got pregnant, it was even tougher. So she's 38 weeks pregnant, and then she stops hearing the baby move around. So we feel we got to go in. And when we go in, I'll never forget the look on the nurse's face when she came out and told us that the umbilical cord got entangled and your baby is not alive and you have to deliver a dead baby at 38 weeks. So if you go to Dallas, Texas right now, you'll see a tombstone for Elijah Stucker. We had a full funeral. And so she was devastated. We all were devastated. And she's like, one more time and that's it. I can't handle this anymore. So just show how good God is. When Karis was born, she's born 2 days before Anitra. And so Anitra got to walk out of the hospital on her birthday with her baby the third time we had tried. And so I share that story just in case people are struggling out there with some real difficult times. Bright horizons can be ahead if you can make it through whatever you're wrestling with now. So happy birthday to both of them. And hopefully that encourages somebody going through some tough times.
Absolutely. Happy birthday, both of you. And that's
do you remember that, Dave? Story. I don't even know if you remember.
That's where, well, you remember that? I do. You brought it up. I had placed it back in my memories, but I know that was a very, very difficult time for you. And I do remember, especially the second miscarriage. So what a joy it was to have Joy and Karis finally come into this world. And I know they've just been such a blessing for you both. Yeah.
All right. Enough of that deep personal stuff. Let's get down to our episode. So I'm going to do admissions tip and admission vernacular. And Dave, I'm toying around with rolling out a third thing I want to try for a while. And I'm not promising I'll do this every episode, but I'm going to do it for a while. And I'm calling it the big number, or I'll share a stat of sort of education and admission interest.
Oh, cool.
And so I'm not promising I'll do it every week, but I'm going to try it for a while and see what we think about it. So, but we'll do that at the end. So for our admissions tip, this is going to seem kind of trite. It's going to seem, I don't know, maybe almost non-intellectual, but listen to me on this. There are some really good YouTube videos for colleges that you're considering.
Yes.
Where these junior and senior students go on and they do these pros and cons lists of all the things about their school. And I really want to encourage you to look at them. And you might think, why would I look at a YouTube video? Well, you know what? You listen to the tour guide, and the tour guide has influence on you. A lot of them are even done by tour guides. And so what I encourage you to do is watch multiple videos like this if you're trying to decide from your colleges, preferably juniors and seniors. Like all YouTube videos, make sure it's fairly recent. Make sure that the thumbs up are way up and the thumbs downs are way down. That's how you can tell the good ones. And you're going to learn some things. One thing you'll find about students, they are not interested in marketing the school. They keep it real and they tell it the way they see it. So you want to picture paint it with the warts? Listen to the students.
Yep. There truly is a YouTube video for everything. So yes, that's a great tip.
There really are. And some schools are better than others. Like, just looking at different schools, and it's like all forms of reviews. If you just see one or two, don't put as much weight on it as if you see a lot. But I strongly encourage you to check it out for schools, especially you seniors who are trying to decide amongst your schools. Okay, Dave.
Okay, lay it on.
Last week you figured out score free.
Yes.
So now I'm going to try you on a new one. And it's called typical assets. What are typical assets?
Typical assets. Okay. Well, I'm going to say that assets are the particular skill sets or extracurriculars or qualities.
You can stop right now because you already got it wrong, dude.
Oh, wait. No, let me work it through,
okay,
man.
Okay,
let me work it through.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, typical assets. Then I'm going to say it's the type of things that a school can offer to the students in terms of its curricula or its
This is a guy who's lost, who's just like totally grasping at straws, man. I gotta cut you off. I gotta cut you off and save the misery. You got one right last week, so revel in that.
All right.
So typical assets. So you will see a lot of schools, especially some of your really wealthy schools like Rice, for example, will say, if you have an income, I believe right now it's $130,000 or less, and they'll say with typical assets, then you will not pay any tuition. All your tuition will be covered. And it's a way that they do two things. They market really well to under-resourced students, and they sort of show their financial wealth, and they minimize the sticker intimidation price. And, Harvard does the same thing. You'll see the same thing. And a lot of these schools do this, where they have these incredible promises for financial resources if you make certain income, and then they'll say with typical assets. What that refers to is part of the assessment that is done to figure out how much somebody can afford for college not only looks at income, but it also looks at assets. But it predicts retirement assets, but it does count other assets like cash and stocks, bonds, mutual funds, CDs, 529 plans, trust funds, things like that. And so if you have the sort of standard amount that the average person has, then they can make that promise. But they can't make that promise if you're someone like Dave and you own a whole bunch of properties. You don't have typical assets. And so, therefore, you don't fall under their promise of, you make X amount, you come for free. Does that make sense, or is that confusing, Dave?
I get you. So, bottom line is, it's the typical wealth that the average family will hold.
Correct.
Is that
correct?
Okay. So, bottom line is, they're not including Bitcoin.
Yeah, because they want to be able to, sort of brag on their financial resources, how they can make it affordable, but they can't just do it in a blanket sense off of income, because if you have a lot of assets and you can turn around and say, wait a minute, you said if I made like $110,000 income, I wouldn't pay tuition, and now you're giving me this huge bill. So that's sort of how they cover their bases. And it's way too complicated to go into explaining it much, even what I did is fairly complicated, right? If you can just say typical assets, basically, yeah, like sort of average family's assets, then this promise applies to you.
Okay.
All right. Ready for this new thing, the big number?
Okay, let's do the big number.
Now, this one I am fully expecting you to get, and I'll give you a hint if you don't get it. The big number is 44.
44.
40. All right, Dave. Now I'm going to give you a
wait. I don't.
Yes.
Cause that's the number of people who actually submitted their standardized test scores in a TEPS optional environment this year.
Bingo, winner, chicken dinner. Good job, my friend. Now, the reason why I said I was going to be harsh on Dave, because Dave and I talked about that through the week, in one of our many conversations. He said, man, now this is based on common data, sort of on the common application, because they can collect massive amounts of data, 900 plus schools. So interesting. So less than half the students submitted test scores this year, 44%. So our big number of the week, 44. All right, Dave, take our article away.
Let's turn to college hot topics in the news.
All right. The article this week is by Scott Jaschik, a familiar name from Inside Higher Ed, and it is Do Top Colleges Favor Applicants Who Are Extremely Wealthy? Well, this article is a response to an article that was written in The Atlantic by a young lady called Caitlin Flanagan. And that article was entitled, quote, "Private schools have become truly obscene. Elite schools breed entitlement, extend inequality, and then pretend to be engines of social change." So as you can imagine, this Atlantic article is sort of designed to throw like a intellectual Molotov cocktail here to generate a conversation, which it did. So I'm just going to give a brief summary, Mark, and then we can go straight into this discussion because there's a lot to talk about here.
Absolutely.
So what this article basically, it started with the statement that, quote, "These schools surround kids," these schools being private schools, "who have every possible advantage with a little embarrassment of riches. And then the graduates hover up the spots in the best colleges." And it gives these statistics that less than 2% of the nation's students attend independent schools. But in schools like Yale, they represent 24% of the incoming freshman class. At Princeton, they're 25% of the incoming freshman class. And at Brown and Dartmouth, they're 29%. And in fact, in the certain high flyer, the elite elites, in the past 5 years, Dalton in New York has spent 1/3 of its class to the Ivy League. Harvard Westlake in LA has sent almost 9 kids a year, 45 kids to Harvard in just the last 5 years alone. And Noble and Greenough in Massachusetts sent 50 kids. And they said it even is pronounced when you compare the elite publics with the elite privates. They compared Stuyvesant High School, which is probably the toughest grade test in school in the country, with Lawrenceville, a well-known feeder to Princeton, and found that kids from Lawrenceville had a 7 times greater chance of getting into Princeton than Stuyvesant High School. So this generated a lot of back and forth discussion in the rest of the article, so I'm going to stop here, Mark, and ask where you want to take this.
Boy, I am so conflicted on this article, Dave. So I'm going to come down on 2 different sides of it. It'll seem like I'm almost completely opposite views. But I think if people listen carefully, it will make a lot of sense. First of all, I need to shout out James Mason. He's one of our most dedicated listeners. Right from the start, he's been a huge supporter of our podcast. He's in Mississippi. And he sent me this Atlantic article to read at the time, which was become such an explosive article. And so I just want to give a shout out to James. But I want to say something, first of all, in defense of the schools, where I think this article gets it wrong and where I think it's an overreach. So, and I can't remember which book this was. There's a college admissions book that talks about what I'm going to say here in a second. And it just really broke it down in some direct and transparent and candid ways, the way college admissions actually works in ways that you won't hear at other places. And so it said, you know, when you look at all these SAT averages and score profiles and everything that you see, you can't really use those to gauge whether or not you're a competitive applicant at these schools. And the reason why it said that is because if you really break down the way admissions actually works, there are primarily 5 groups of people that have built-in lobbyists in the admission office. So you think of like lobbyists going to Washington, right? And like the gun lobby, and they'll hire all these lobbyists, or the pharmaceutical company or the insurance company. They hire these lobbyists, multi-million-dollar salaries, work on K Street to work over the politicians and to try to get people to vote your way. Well, that's kind of how admissions works. And this is not something you're going to hear at an information session, but that's our job in this podcast, is to peel back the curtain, show you how the sausage is made. And if you're one of those members that's got a built-in lobbyist on your behalf, you're going to have so much more success in the admission process. And then it says, everybody else it describes, you're just folks. You're just folks. So are you in a category of a just folks or built-in lobbyists? Now, according to the book, it listed, some of the built-in lobbies. It didn't actually include all of them, but I will mention some of the big ones. So there's the alumni.
Yep.
Okay. You're a child of alumni. Look at Harvard's acceptance rates for alumni compared to regular. Even that, I'll tell you, still have to be really strong as a Harvard alumni. I've seen really strong Harvard alumni not get in, but still the acceptance rate is still significantly higher. Okay. If you're alumni, a lot of times at these schools, you have a special admissions committee, a third committee that has to review before an alumni is denied. And sometimes a special phone call is made and all kinds of, so you get special attention as an alumni. One I definitely want to come back to, Dave, and you and I have talked about a lot. One of the biggest ones that flies on the radar, under the radar, are you a faculty kid?
Yes.
And I want us to talk about that in a second as it pertains to your school, lab school, where your daughter went, in UChicago. A third one, are you an underrepresented student of color? That's extremely hard demographic for them to get. Typically, that's going to be Native Americans, in some cases Latinos, in some cases African Americans, not always Africans or Afro-Caribbeans, depending on the school, and in some cases, certain Asian demographics that are hard for schools to get. Okay. Fourth one, development cases. Can your dad build the $40 million building that they're trying to build? And every time you walk in campus and you see someone's name on a building, rest assured somebody with that name gave a big donation. Okay. And then the biggest one of all, athletes, recruited athletes. Now, there's some others like celebrity kids. If you're the parent of a celebrity kid, you have a built-in lobbyist because of the publicity the school will get. So let's just go with those. Now, why do I bring that up? Because one of the things that these schools do, they know that colleges are looking for those people, so they recruit them on the front end. So they're in the student body.
And you're saying these schools being the independent high schools now.
Correct.
So
it really gives a false sense. So someone will look at a college list from these schools and they'll be like, wow, look at where kids from Harvard or Westlake go. But they don't realize that they recruited the fencer or the person that does the sailing or the water polo. They recruit all those people. They recruit the absolute top students of color, like the 1% of the 1%. Okay, they have plenty of alumni kids there. And I'll just give you a case in point. They happen to use the example of Lawrenceville, a school I know extremely well because only 60 some miles away from where I worked. I know a lot of people work in that office and a lot of people at that school. Okay. And they compared that to Stuyvesant and they used Princeton as an example. Lawrenceville is right around the corner from Princeton. It has lots of Princeton faculty. I can tell you, as somebody who's worked with faculty kids, it is almost as big a hook as anything. It carries way more weight than alumni and student of color, being a faculty kid. I can tell you that. It may not carry as much weight as a development admit or a recruited athlete in a revenue-producing sport. And Dave, why don't you just take a second to talk about your experience at the lab school and University of Chicago and how people can get a skewed view if they see how many kids are getting into UChicago from the lab school.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, with the lab school, about 10 years ago, the Wall Street Journal did an article where it included University of Chicago as one of the elite schools and ranked the lab school as one of the top schools for getting the kids into the elite colleges. Well, the University of Lab School is a feeder school for their faculty. And it really started years ago when Hyde Park in Chicago was considered a undesirable place on the south side of poverty and crime. It's changed. And the University of Chicago really put a lot of resources in developing their own independent high school so it would serve the faculty as a recruiting tool for the faculty. So now even today, over 1/3 of the kids are actually kids of people who work for the university, usually on a faculty role. And it's part of the contracts of many of these faculty that not only if their kids have a much easier time getting into the lab school, but they get discounted tuition both in the high school and in the college if their child goes on to go to University of Chicago. So when you go to University of Chicago, one of the statistics you find is that out of a class of 125, I think 150, a good 20, 25 kids every year get into the lab school and University of Chicago. And it would give you the impression that, man, if you go to University of Chicago lab school, these kids are really smart and they're getting into the university. And that's not quite true. Yes, the kids are smart and yes, they do very well. But if your parent is a faculty member at the University of Chicago, your chances of getting in are multiple times greater than the general public. And having gone to Princeton and knowing Lawrenceville, I can tell you that Lawrenceville serves the same function as the University of Chicago Laboratory High School. It is a feeder school to Princeton where many of the Princeton faculty actually have their kids. It's a huge hook. It's a huge advantage. It's almost so much to say that many of the kids who go to the University of Chicago High School, who are faculty kids, the University of Chicago almost becomes a safety school for them, which is almost unheard of at a school like University of Chicago to say there's any concept of a safety school. So many of these schools, and I know when we talk about a lot of the elite high schools in the Northeast, even though they don't have a direct university connection, schools like Hotchkiss associated with Yale and
Correct.
the Phillips Andover and Exeter are associated with all of the Ivies. They have so much alumni and faculty connections to those particular schools that it turns out to be the biggest hook there is. And I'll give it back to you, Mark, on that one.
Yeah, and so I just want to push, my point is you can't just look at the percentage of kids like the article did that comes from these schools for the Browns and the Dartmouths and the Yales and the Princetons and then infer that this is just all strictly benefits that they're accruing just because they go there. Yeah, what happens is the kids that are there are meeting a niche need that colleges have. They have lots of kids with these built-in lobbies. And I'll give you another example. William Fitzsimmons is the dean of Harvard. He's been there for 50 years. I had a conversation with him, Dave, about Nobles, which is listed here. And he was like, wow, we got a lot of great athletes from Nobles this year. And Nobles is known for sending athletes to Harvard.
And Mark, can you please specify in what sports?
Well, normally they're in niche sports, right? I mean, ice hockey could be one, but it can be, a lot of these Ivy League schools have a lot of niche sports that you don't see at other places. They just do.
The point is these are not
fencing, water polo, skiing. Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
So, but also they'll go recruit them too. So I just want to point out there is a lot of skew in just looking at the numbers, because if you just take those 6 built-in lobbyists that I mentioned, alumni, faculty kids, underrepresented students of color, recruited athletes, development admits, and celebrity kids, they have an inordinate number of those people at these schools. And that's why you cannot look at a college list from these schools and think that will be you. And I have people do that all the time because I do independent school placement. They'll be, wow, look at the college list at Milton, at Hotchkiss, at Choate, at Andover, at Exeter, and Deerfield, and all the different boarding schools. And they'll think, oh, wow, that could be me if I go there, not realizing that, for example, Dave, you go to Deerfield, you know whose name's all over Deerfield's buildings?
Which one?
What are the name of those brothers? They were 2 of the richest brothers in the world, and one of them recently died.
Koch brothers.
Yes, the Koch brothers. Their names are all over the buildings.
Yeah.
Okay, if you have someone from the Koch family applying to your school, it's nothing for them to drop $50 million and build the new science center that you want or the new student union. And people get in. And people might wonder, well, why does it happen with faculty kids? Well, think about it from the school's perspective. We have an amazing faculty member. Do we really want them to pick up and switch and go to our competitor because we didn't admit their kid? Like, it's just not worth us losing a great faculty member. So we'll take their B student and we get to keep the faculty member. So that's one thing I want to point out where I think the article really misses things. I also think that, the other place where I feel the article misses things is it sort of went to some of the extreme wealth within the independent schools and sort of painted a brush that all independent schools are like that. And that's just not true. Like, most people actually pick independent schools because they want their child to have more personal, individual attention. They want high academics, and they want some type of character component built into the education. And it's something that if they had resources, would do it. And it's not necessarily just this gaudy, garish show of extravagance. That is out there, but that is not the norm. And so I do want to point that out.
And then I want to dovetail on that and say, so if you have a typical incoming freshman class at one of these independent schools, and you've already reserved a lot of those spots for faculty members, for wealthy alumni, and so forth, what happens to the remaining spots? Well, I look at it like a process of making whiskey, where you start with something.
Are you a whiskey maker on me now, man? Are you hiding a skill that I didn't know you had? Now you're a whiskey maker. First you're a landlord, you're a doctor, now you're a whiskey maker.
Yeah, Mark also knows I'm a bit of a cusser and a drinker. So
I didn't know you're into the whiskey making.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, when you start off with, there's a great show on Discovery called Moonshiners. It talks about these guys that go up into the Kentucky foothills and make their own whiskey. And when I was down in North Carolina, I loved the little moonshining whiskey. But anyways, with whiskey, you distill the alcohol so you might start off with only 5% alcohol, but by the time you evaporate all the water, you get down to something that's 90 proof. That's similar to the admissions process that, Mark, you can tell about experiences where these schools get a raft of applicants with incredibly high test scores. And by time they actually distill it down to the small group of kids they admit, they have already rejected valedictorians and high test scores and so forth. So the incoming class of kids is already so incredibly strong that you can make an argument that many of those kids that would have gotten in would have done fine wherever they went, because they are just they're skimming off the very top of the academic elite, even when you adjust for all the kids who are alumni and athletes and so forth.
Yeah, now here's the other side of it. I said you're going to be conflicted by my view. So that's the side where I feel that the article is a complete embellishment, almost a caricature, and it really is an example of statistics being used and abused and misused. Now here's the other side. There are lots and lots and lots of advantages that come with wealth in this college admission process. And because what happens at these private schools, they hire some of the top people from college admissions. They come in and explain how things really work. Case in point, Derek Furta. After spending 15 years at University of Pennsylvania, now he's flipped over to William Penn Charter. He's a college counselor at one of the leading schools in Pennsylvania. Don't you think he can educate parents and the whole school and the principal on what Penn is looking for? Of course he can. And so one of the things Bruce Pock points out, former dean of admission at Pomona, and I've really appreciated him because when he was at Pomona, he was there for almost 25 years. He was always pressing the envelope and pushing for access and things like this. So now he's, in a different role, but he's still speaking out on issues that he's always spoken out on. And he points out how independent schools have, you can study the data on this, study NAIS data. They have high grade inflation, a lot of them. Well, that's intentional. Because if you know that these schools are going to be dinging my kids with B pluses, then you go in and you say, you know what, we got to be careful on how we grade. And I've seen independent schools, Dave, where 70% of kids get grades of A- or higher.
And they make that point, yes.
Yeah, and the point. So the point is, it is true that these schools have expertise that they know how to apply to the admission process that advantages kids apart from just the lobbyists. Another example they use is the essay, the way essays are treated, in independent schools, and also and recommendations. A student really, really well. You can write a full 2-page, in-depth, detailed recommendation. That's a huge advantage. I'm in the admission side. I know what I'm getting. They know their kids. They write with transparency. I know what I'm getting from here. Over here, I don't know what I'm getting. Admissions is about risk and reward. I'm going to go with what I know I'm getting, as long as as long as writing about the kid doesn't throw them under the bus. But and for essays, yeah, I've shared with this before on this podcast a couple examples. One school in California, I won't name, that has 2 incredibly talented professional writers that write all the letters for the senior class. They send these people off to every imaginable recommendation writing workshop. So they're basically like professional recommendation writers, and they write for everybody. I mentioned another school, in the Gulf Coast area, I'll just leave it at that, where the college counselors see every recommendation before it's submitted. And if they don't like something they see in there from a teacher, they send it back to the teacher and say, clean this up. What you put is going to get this kid denied. So those are advantages that are built into the system with money. But here's where I want to go. I want to go in a different direction with Dave. I want to challenge these schools because where they're not being diverse is socioeconomically. And I've said this before, 39% of the country receives the Pell Grant. It's not uncommon at all at these schools to see 7%, 9%, 11%, 13% getting the Pell Grant. I will commend Princeton. They've gone from 7% 10 years ago up to 19%. That's a huge increase. Now, here's where all of this could change overnight. I've always been so critical of U.S. News and World Report because they never had any component of diversity at all in their rankings. How can you be talking about quality education if it's homogenous? That's ridiculous. So after tremendous pushback and blowback from some people, they've added a little teeny little bit now, what they call social mobility. And basically what they do is they want to see if you're admitting under-resourced kids, are they graduating? Well, all they would have to do is change their formula to say that having more of the population that looks like America is a quality education because you're going out into a real America. And schools that have a higher percentage of Pell Grant recipients get points. It's all formula driven. And then you would see a place like UCLA that's 30% Pell Grant probably be number one in the ratings, or Cal Berkeley. But, you know, these schools can stay with their 13 and their 11 and their 9% Pell Grant recipients and not face any blowback. I'm talking about the colleges. But if the rankings, trust me, rankings drive so much. People don't realize. Board of trustees say, we want to move up in the rankings. What do we have to do? And it governs what the admission office does. So they put pressure on the president. President puts pressure on the admission office. Next thing you know, you're changing to try to climb the rankings. And that happens at majority of schools. It's not something that's an exception. So all the rankings would have to do is say, if your school is too full of affluent kids, we're going to ding you in the rankings because you don't look like America and you're not preparing people for the real world. And it would change overnight who these schools would admit. That would do more to change all this stuff than anything. But as long as the colleges don't have any incentive to really do that, then they're going to continue to cater to, to more affluent populations. And here's the other thing. When you're wealthy, you can build your kids' extracurriculars from the time you're really young. You can have little Johnny start taking, harp and bassoon lessons when the time he's 4 or 5, and he has 13 years of that, and he can get recruited into the orchestra. You can't do that if you don't have means. So I'm not going to say there's not advantages, but society's always going to have advantages for the affluent. I just want to hear your thoughts because I think I've said all I have to say.
Well, I do want to use this opportunity to actually correct an overstatement we made last podcast, in which we somewhat implied that public schools were in some way easier than independent schools because there weren't as much academically stressful and so forth. And Mark, you could share the name of the person if she feels comfortable. But
yeah, I don't want to share names without getting permission. But we got a really, really, really nice letter from someone who loves the podcast.
Yeah,
but said, I got a little of a bone to pick with you. I felt like you stereotyped public schools.
Yeah,
in that conversation. And the listener went on to say, I'm in the Silicon Valley, and these public schools are as stressful as anywhere. And you made it sound like you could, it's not going to be a stressful experience in the public school. So, yes. Dave wanted to take this opportunity to address that.
And I want to say she was right. And we overstated that. And we know that there are many, many very competitive public schools that have, in many ways, as much academic stress and rigor as the independent schools. We can look at areas of Silicon Valley, any rich suburb of any given city. There's always the high-profile public schools, and many times they're tougher because they have higher numbers and don't have the benefits of all these resources. So I do want to use this opportunity to correct that overstatement that we made last week. It was a very good point that was brought up by the listener.
Yeah, and we encourage you, by the way, send in feedback. It doesn't always have to be flowery and effusive. Like, if you feel we've slightly missed a mark on something, send it in. I've had an ongoing correspondence with a regular listener who's pointed out the fact they feel I'm a little too hard on College Confidential and Reddit. And they've had some good points. They said if you really know how to use it, there can be some really good message boards there that if you're responsible in your usage, there's value there. And I would agree with that as well. And so we appreciate that feedback when we get it.
So my thought is, totally realistically, the rich and powerful have always had advantages in this society and will always continue to have advantage. The reality is that our children, Mark, are never going to have the same easy path or the same open doors as the Zuckerbergs or the Bezoses or the person who can afford to write a check for $10 million and get their kid into any school in the world. But that being said, I think the purpose of the podcast is to mitigate those advantages and to bring, with knowledge and with preparation, to even out the playing field where possible. So that's point number one. And point number two, recognizing that for many schools, it is true. 20%, 25% of these kids get into Ivy League schools, but it also means that 60, 70% of kids do not. And many of those 60 and 70% of the kids are kids who in any other setting would have been total superstars. But now in this incredibly distilled environment of stress and excellence, they have a hard time standing out. And many of those kids, quite frankly, despite what we're saying about competitive public schools, might have been much better elsewhere. Because, if you're going in to Phillips Exeter, no matter how smart you are, you're still competing against that faculty kid.
Well, also, let me bring a point up, Dave, related to what you're saying. So what the article doesn't bring out, and I know this from experience, I've had multiple middle school valedictorians not get in some of these schools.
Yeah.
So when you talk about the percentage of the population, are they taking into consideration that some of these schools are literally turning down valedictorians? That's how talent rich their environment is. So there's just some statistics. What should our takeaways be on this article for the listener? From the article, not necessarily our podcast, but from the article.
Well, I think they have a point. I think that it is unfair that independent schools should dominate to the way they do. And I think it's unfair that so much of this domination is linked to wealth and privilege. That's the reality of the life that we live. But that being said, I don't think it's quite as bad as the numbers suggest. And there are ways to mitigate those. And that's what Your College Bound Kid is all about.
Yeah. And I think, one of my points would be careful with statistics.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of stats in here that are skewed. Another point of the article would be, rather than just get frustrated and think, wow, the deck is completely stacked against me, look at, what's happening from certain schools. One, broaden your college list and don't buy into the false, canard that there's only 20 good colleges out there. That's a bunch of malarkey.
Right.
Okay. That's the first thing that I would say. But secondly, do what you're doing. Educate yourself as to what it is that these schools are looking for. And you'll do really well in the process if you apply to the right schools. You really will. And most importantly, there's a lot of hullabaloo about where people go to school, but that is not necessarily correlated to life outcomes. And it's when people buy into that they get discouraged. You really have a lot more control over your destiny than you think you do. And if you buy into the notion that if you don't go to brand name U, you're kind of relegated to B status as far as career success, you're buying into something that just quite honestly just is not true.
Yep.
Let me say this too, Dave. I always welcome an opportunity to challenge the system to improve and to challenge school to do better. And so I do appreciate this article looking at in which ways are we catering to the wealthy and that we can maybe be a little bit more egalitarian. And even that, I think it overstated some things to make a point. If it challenges schools to look at themselves and look at their own bias in any way, shape, or form, then it can serve a positive purpose. So I want to just make sure I strike that balance as well.
Sounds good.
Some people think you're going to have this perfect society where there's no country clubs or everything's going to be utopic. And it's just not going to be that way.
And I was going to ask you this question. You take Phillips Exeter. what percentage of the parents went to Ivy League schools?
Well, it's going to be much higher than in your regular population, right? So it creates the alumni.
Yeah, it's probably going to be around mirroring the percentage of kids that get in.
Correct.
Like
so you have the
30%.
alumni. You have it there in the alumni. You have it in the alumni.
Right. So you actually have triple threat there. You have alumni, faculty, and wealth, sometimes wrapped into one kid, right? So you have
not only that, you often have an athletic or artistic hook.
Right.
Because not only because of affluent parents build and cultivate and develop that, but because these schools recruit that in their admission process. So they find out, oh, you're incredible at crew. Okay, that's going to be a plus factor in your admissions, application. Look, these schools know that part of how they market themselves is by that college list. So they know how to look for kids that the colleges already will want and take them on the front end.
Okay, so one thing to add in the podcast is many times you have kids applying for these schools who have multiple built-in hooks. They may be an
Correct.
alumni kid. They may have a father who is wealthy and may contribute. They may also be a faculty kid, and on top of that, they have great scores. And on top of that, they've probably got some type of leadership in arts or athletics. So and they might even be in a minority.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's in a niche sport. Like they learn early in the game, okay, it's easier to get into these colleges with these sports. So those other sports will start playing at a young age. And then with their wealth, they get private coaching, all the right camps, all the right clinics. And then knowing that I can place this kid at Princeton, they're amazing at crew, boarding school, or the independent day school, they prioritize them and who gets through their front door.
Right.
So they already know before the kid walks in, this is a kid that can send to the Ivy League. Look how well they play squash.
You know what? I almost think of it like the genetically engineered Jean-Claude Van Damme super soldier. It's like you figured out the genetic profile.
Science fiction.
Yeah, I know. You should include this. They've got it down packed. It's like they got the Jean-Claude Van Damme model of how to get into Harvard, and they start working on you from middle school so that they create this perfect student monster all ready to take over the universe.
The masters of the universe.
That's right. The evil empire.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, friends, we have a super duper big announcement to make this day. And I've been talking to Nika. Do we make it today? Do we make it last week? When do we do it? And so I'm here to say that after, 3 years and 3 months of being on this podcast, and then another 6 to 8 months of prep. Remember how we were going to launch in the fall?
Mm-hmm.
So Anika is going to transition into an alternate role. She's still going to be part of our team, but Dr. Lisa Ruff will be doing the regular segment. So she wants to finish through the book, 171.
Got to get through 171.
Yes, Dr. Lisa Ruff will be doing the question from a listener. And Anika will be our alternate. So if we have a conflict, if Lisa can't make it, if Dave can't make it, you'll still be hearing from Anika. She's not going anywhere, but...
Kind of, sort of, but...
Yes. She's got this passion for writing. If you go back and listen to episode number 1, our jump off, Anika's like, I'm Anika from handleitmom.com. And then the other day I was like, should I be telling people to check on handleitmom.com? She's like, I haven't been to that thing in years.
Which, by the way, I'm not even doing anymore. It's going to be AnikaMadden.com. I'm excited.
Oh, branding yourself. Mm-hmm. That's what they say. But Anika has not been able to let her writing talents blossom like she wants to. And being able to save some of the time and prep for this and focus on her writing and be in the alternate role will allow her writing to flourish. So we want to support her and we want to say thank you. And,
you're
not going anywhere, so we'll still see you sometimes as that alternate.
That's right.
I might have to tell Lisa and Dave, fake like you're sick every now and then.
They will never do that, Mark.
Our listeners need their Anika fix.
No, please. I told you, Mark, I'm going to be a long lost memory soon.
See, you don't know your impact. You're just so humble. Well, thank you. And we wish you well. So that'll start on 172. And so we have, I guess, 4 weeks left with Anika in her current role.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we are doing our countdown. Our countdown on where Fortune 500 CEOs got their undergraduate degree. And 10th spot, we had 8 schools that were all tied. Yale and New Haven, Illinois and Champaign, Bucknell and Lewisburg, PA, Texas and Austin, Princeton and Princeton, Lehigh and Bethlehem, SUNY Binghamton in Binghamton, Michigan State University in East Lansing, Michigan. And we have 4 schools tied with 6 CEOs. Last week, we rolled out UPenn in Philly. This week, we're rolling out Cal Berkeley in Berkeley, California.
Okay.
So there we go. We have 2 more tied with 6. There's 1 all by itself that had 7. 1 all by itself with 8. And then we had 1 all by itself with 10.
Wow.
1 all by itself with 12. And 1 all by itself with 14. So that's where we're going for the next few weeks. All right. So we are in our book chapter. And as you know, those of you who are regular listeners know that the last 8 chapters of the book focus on students who are already in college and try to give you some tips to excel while you're in college. And so this chapter, it's got to kind of explain the meaning here, but the title is, Why Should I Try to Avoid Changing Colleges? Anika, you've read the chapter. What were your takeaways?
Well, why should I not transfer? The main thing was because the credits are not going to always transfer with you. So it's almost like in some cases you might be starting over. As a matter of fact, I had someone tell me recently their daughter was planning to transfer and she found out that she was going to be a freshman. Like she was going to go just like literally start over, even though she had spent all the time she had spent at, whatever other institution she was at. So yeah, that's the biggie. All right.
Yeah, and this is some of the hardest counseling situations I find myself in. Should I or should I not transfer, especially if a student is reaching out to me after one semester? So why do you think I would say that, Anika? Why do you think I would say this is some of the most difficult situations for me to give them some guidance?
Well, but here's my question though, and maybe this will lead into it because I want.
Are you trying to answer my question with the question?
Yes.
I caught that little evasive tactic.
No, seriously, because the way you position it in the book, you say that the transfer is about, like, you associate it with not really wanting to switch fields, like you want to go into something else, right? But is that always the case? I thought transfers were mostly about people just not liking the school that they attended. Like I thought it was just about, I just don't like this school.
I would agree. Yeah, I would agree. So, but you still not getting away with that. Answer my question. Why is it hard? So I'll concede that. So why do you think that I say that it's difficult when a student reaches out to me? Let's say they started the school in August, and let's say it's middle of October, and they're like, I want to leave. I want to try a new school. Can you help me? Because I get that a lot. Why do you think I feel that's difficult?
I don't know. I mean, you mean difficult for the student themselves? Like why?
Difficult for me to discern whether or not I should say,
go ahead and transfer or not.
Yeah, let's do it. Here's what we need to do, blah, 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 or whether I should encourage them to stick it out a little bit longer.
Well, just that. It's about, sticking with it. Getting it in. And like, what do we talk about? Grit at one point in time? So that, like, you don't want to discourage grit and just following through with it.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the reasons why it's hard. So I would say several reasons why it's hard. It's hard because a couple months into a new school, people are still experiencing transition.
Right. And
transition has pain. Transition's difficult. Look at you, Anika, when you moved from Atlanta to out in the country, the boonies in North Carolina. It took you a long time. I even still don't know if you're adjusted.
I'm still traumatized.
See? Now you're going on 3+ years.
Right. Still traumatized.
Yeah. So transition is already hard. And so one of the things I'm always trying to discern is this just transition conflict?
Mm-hmm.
Transition pain? Or is it really a bad match? Or sometimes the student hasn't learned how to tap into the resources of the school yet that we talked about last week to make for a smooth transition. Or maybe they're not in the right field of study, but they could still be in that field of study at that school. Or maybe they just have roommate conflict that's like clouded their whole mindset. And also the point you brought up, which is I don't want to be encouraging a bad habit of you cut and run loose every time it gets tough in life,
right.
Because That's going to carry over to relationships. That's going to carry over to job flipping around. I'm not going to mention names, but there's someone I regard as a friend, and I tell you, I credit her. I credit her talent. I kid you not. It's an admissions professional. I know, Anika, that has had 9 jobs in the last 9 years.
Good gracious.
And several of them were like directors. And when she was on her 5th one in 5 years, I was saying to myself, how is she talking all these people into hiring her when they could just see that she's just bounced so
jumping
much?
around, yeah.
Yeah. But no, I'm not gonna say anymore because I don't want people guessing she talking about.
Well, but here's the thing. So, what are the reasons that you hear most commonly about why I want to transfer? Are they telling you that I just hate the school, or are they telling you?
Yeah. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because here's the other side of it. If it's not a good match, it's not a good match, and sometimes people do know that 2 months in.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the most common match is most common reason is I just don't like it here. The people are different than how I thought they would be.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my kind of student.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, I'm saying all this to say Joy transferred. I mean, Joy thought she was going to be playing basketball at Valdosta State.
Right.
And, she had that broken leg and, one thing led to another. And then not only that, the basketball not work out, but, it wasn't as academically challenging as she wanted it to be. And the students were different than she thought they were going to be. And so, so she transferred. And she's just flourished at UGA. And so she's an example of somebody absolutely made sense for her to do it. She's got over 3.7. And, she said to me the other day, she said, I was in the bookstore and I saw this big picture of UGA campus. And I want to buy that and put that on my wall because this is the place where I really got my love for learning.
Oh, wow.
So for her, it was transformational. So the other side of it, if it's a bad match, it's a bad match. And now, mind you, she did it 2 years. And I have a very different reaction when someone is saying it to me in year 2 versus year 1. And sometimes it's right in year 1. I mean, I helped multiple students in their first year transfer this year, but I just like to go through and check and make sure it's not some of those other, things that we discussed. But to fully answer your question, it can be lots of things. It can be, I don't like the people. The people are not how I thought they would be. The academics are different than I thought I would be. And then another thing is the surrounding area too. Like, Joy likes Athens way better than Valdosta. Joy will say that she had amazing teachers at Valdosta. They were great. Mm-hmm. She just wasn't necessarily a fan of the students and the town. So it's usually something to do with students or academics or the area. Those are the 3 biggest reasons I find, Anika. And then the 4th one is that I'm switching majors and they don't have my program. Those would be the big 4.
Okay. So, but when you help them transfer, are you seeking out other schools that will transfer most of their credits, or doesn't matter at that point? You just try to get them out of
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So, because one of the reasons, as I mentioned, why you want to be careful with this is the research that shows that so many times your credits don't transfer. In fact, a study came out from the General Accounting Office, GAO, that said 43% of college credits, or 13 credits, because this is based on a student that hadn't been at school that long, don't transfer over. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, the thing is, this is tricky because people will look at it. One of the people will normally ask, "Are my credits going to transfer?" Okay, mm-hmm. And a lot of times they'll be told yes, but what they'll realize is they'll be counted as general credits, but they won't necessarily be counted as credits toward a major. Mm. So that's why, I read another study said the average transfer student graduates with 147 credit hours when they typically need 120.
And is that because you're going from one major to a different major, or does it matter? Like, is it just a transfer in general?
That's a great question, because really, to be more technically accurate, that study should break that out. Because a lot of times when you're transferring to a different major, and inevitably you're going to take more courses, right? Because you realize, oh, gee, I went down a path I didn't like. So that study didn't break that out. Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's because courses don't transfer at all. Sometimes they don't transfer into your major, and sometimes you switch majors. It's a little bit of all of the above. And there are places that have incredible systems set up, right? Especially between community colleges and 4-year schools. The state of California's got probably the best system that I know of. They've just got a real seamless transfer system between their community college system, and their 4-year colleges. And they love taking those community college kids. And a lot of times it's easier to get into like a UC school from a community college than it is transferring from a 4-year school. And Florida's got a good system. I think Texas got a decent system. Georgia doesn't have much in the way of a community college system, but they do have the whole USG 4-year school. So pretty much anything you take at any of the, I think there's 26 universities within USG system. They keep merging together, so maybe 24 or 5 now, but last time I checked, there were 26. You can pretty much transfer anything in there, and it's all going to count, so it makes it kind of nice. So Joy never lost a single credit.
Oh, wow.
Case, you know. But those are just some of the reasons why you want to just think long and hard. It's the transfers. It's the spending the extra year, the extra money, you know, the grit issue, and then just really asking yourself, have you given the place a chance, or are you just going through transition pain? I'm not saying not to transfer. I'd be crazy to say that. I mean, I help facilitate my own daughter's transfer.
Right.
You know, and I work with other students, you know, that successfully transfer. It's just, you know, there are other students, though, that I talk out of it as well, as I take them through kind of a series of checkpoints.
So, but how does a parent, I mean, we get how you do it, Mark, but how does a parent do that? Like if my kid comes to me and says, hey, I want to transfer.
Yeah.
How do you discern all that stuff? We're not college counselors.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. Well, you know, that's a really good question. I mean, first start by asking the questions, you know, what is the reason? Find out what is the reason they actually want to transfer. And when you find out what the reason is, then you can find out a little bit more. Is it something that could be fixed within the same school with a change? So let's say you have like, you know, it could be, if you're not enjoying your courses, is it because you're in the wrong major, or is it because the academic climate isn't to your liking? You know, like I said, are there factors like roommate tension and things that are creating, you know, the repulsion to the location? Or have you tapped into all the resources that the school has and tried that to see what they offer? How much are you taking advantage of the advising system that's there and the academic success center and all the resources? You know, and then sometimes it's just how strong is the intensity of the feelings. When the intensity of the feelings are really strong, that's usually an indication to leave. And as my own daughter said when I talked to her about this, she said, if your mental health is at stake, then you need to bounce. You know, nothing's worth sacrificing your mental health. Of course, this is spoken from someone who's about to get her master's in clinical mental health counseling, so she always looks at things through mental health. I get the mental health answer a lot in my family. You know, that's her thing. So, but I think it is a good answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, you know, and so, but sometimes, honestly, Anika, it really does come down to the passion of those feelings. And then the other thing is, as a student I'm working with in Minnesota, you know, who I've tried to really talk out of transferring this year. And he has even said to me, you know what, I'm probably going to stay. But he wants to explore his options and also understand that's okay, too. Mm-hmm. You know, it's kind of like I tell people when I'm recommending that they apply. And they're like, well, I'm not sure. And I always say applying does not mean you're committing to go. And so that applies to here as well. Like, you know, you can go through that process and keep an open mind, like I'm still comparing it to where I'm at. I think a couple of the students that I worked with this year on helping transfer, they never went in with the mindset of and both of these students actually, I'm thinking of, they were first years. So they'd only been there a few months. And it's really hard this year because one of the things I also challenge people on is that the pandemic is not a normal situation. Mm-hmm. You know, because when one case the student said, well, I don't feel I'm connecting with anybody. And I said, yeah, but you're at home.
Right.
You know, I mean, I really believe it would be completely different. But at the same time, you know, I always say it's your life, not mine. So if they really, really want to do it, of course, I'm going to help them. I'm not going to stop them. I'm going to do like kidnap them, you know?
Yes.
You know? I just want them to think through all these things, you know? But in this case of these two students I'm thinking of right now, and I'm mentioning these two because one, they are first years, and two, they're both cases where I just never was really sure, but I also not judging.
Right.
You know, we kind of said, well, let's go through the process and then let's compare what emerges versus what you have. And that's okay to do that as well. You don't have to like go in like I'm definitely transferring or I'm not definitely transferring. You can say, you know, let me explore and I'll evaluate it and keep an open mind.
Good luck to those children.
Any more you want to add?
Think we got it.
We got it.
It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right. Question from a listener. Anika, I'm excited about this one.
Question from the listener. Okay, so the question is from Miss Allison in Ohio.
Ohio.
And she says, this is such a great question. How do admission offices review twins in the college admission process?
It is a great question. It really is. First of all, for our regular listeners who listen every week and know we do admissions vernacular, there's a term admissions officers use for this. They refer to twins as multiples. Of course, that also encompasses triplets, and so dealing with multiples. And last year I had 5 sets of twins and 1 set of triplets I worked with.
Wow, good gracious.
Yeah, I know. This year is like 1 set of twins, no triplets. So let's talk about it, because it's a great question and it's a very nuanced answer. First thing I'll say is that schools will fall into 3 categories in terms of how they handle this. In some cases, it's just a complete non-factor. You may as well, not know each other on an elevator, let alone be twins, in terms of how individualistically they handle it.
Right.
The second category is they will evaluate individually, but they try to decision similarly. So in other words, it is a factor, but they're not going to make it the definitive factor, and they do reserve the right to make an individual decision on each student. So do you see the difference between that first one and the second one?
Mm-hmm, I do.
Yeah. And then the third one is they're going to make the same decision for both. So those are the 3. Now, I have never seen a study on this, but anecdotally over my 21 years, the most common position of those 3 that I've seen amongst schools that do holistic admissions is that they will evaluate you individually, but they will take your twin status into account.
Why is that, though? Or they feel like they're doing some service to them by not separating them, or I don't get it. Because if I have twins and one is doing really well and one's not,
yeah,
like I don't
remember I said we'll try to. That's not that try to doesn't mean that they're going to definitely do it. And the more selective the school, the better they both better be very, very strong.
Mm-hmm.
So I just said that the most common position is that they will evaluate individually. That's the emphasis here,
right?
But they will try to decision similarly. So try means, if one's strong and one's weak, then they tried and it didn't work. I just want to make that clear. The key factor is that they will evaluate individually. That's the most common. But try to decision similarly versus, make the same decision on both. That's different.
So I guess if you have 2 strong, let's take it from the context of 2 strong kids, like a set of twins that are very strong.
Yeah, exactly. So most of the time in those cases, schools will decision similarly, and they'll take into account. First of all, they will oftentimes work off of the assumption that if you have twins that are applying to the same school, that they probably do want to be together. Now, I've seen very different types of twins I've worked with over the years. One type are totally different kids, and the parent and the kids want different schools. And believe it or not, Anika, when I told you those like 5 sets of twins and triplets I worked with, all 6 of those cases fell into that category last year.
Really?
None of them wanted to. Well, there was only one. There was one of those 6 that their preference would have been to be together, but it wasn't a deal breaker.
Okay.
And they actually didn't end up at the same school. That was this current class, actually. And so they both just made their decisions now. One's going to be in Ohio, one's going to be in New York. So there's some that totally different kids, and parents and kids agree, different schools. Then another category is they would prefer to be at the same school, but they're open to different, which was how that last set I mentioned to you ended up. They would prefer to be at the same, but they ended up at different. All the other ones actually kind of felt like, I love my sister, I love my brother, blah, blah, but, we can kind of love each other at different schools. And then there's another type, and I find this is quite common with identicals, even that I never had it last year. They're like joined at the hip. They're like Siamese twins. I'm serious. There was one I had probably about 17 or 18 years ago. It was fascinating to me how in sync they were. They would like think the same thoughts and had the same interests. I mean, yes. And they even had got the same on all their standardized testing, PSAT and S.
Whoa.
I mean, you can definitely see there's something to that. You'll have a whole debate about nature and nurture. Like which one has the most influence? Is it your environment or your genetics? And I believe both are incredibly powerful, but there's definitely something to genetics because you have the same identical, and we know like versus fraternal, they're same embryo splitting, all that. Like it's amazing how similar they can be and how they almost feel disconnected if they're not around each other.
Wow.
Anika and I are so grateful for everyone who has financially supported our podcast. It allows us to pay our staff and cover our other auxiliary expenses involved in having a weekly professional podcast.
At the start of every month, we're going to start sending a special gift to anyone who financially supports your college-bound kid.
I will be sending our donors this bonus content once a month directly to your email. The bonus content will be between 10 to 15 minutes in length. Usually it will be a college-related topic that I'm passionate about. Occasionally, it'll be another bonus hot topic in the news segment. sometimes it'll be an answer to a question that one of our listeners submits to us via email.
And you'll receive these monthly audio blogs for a gift of any amount. We know that $5,000 to one person is $5 to someone else, and we don't want your budget to be a hindrance to you receiving this additional bonus content. So if you want to support our show, just go to yourcollegeboundkid.com and click the donate button. And if you've already financially supported our podcast, you will automatically start receiving this bonus content via your email.
This bonus content is our way of letting our financial supporters know in a tangible way how much we appreciate you. And if you have any questions at all about our monthly bonus content, just send your questions our way. That's to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Once again, questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Now, I've had some like that, too, that have felt like, you know what? They're not going to be able to live that way for the rest of their life. Like, they're not going to marry the same person. You know what I mean? So this would be a good opportunity for them to learn how to deal with not being. I've had that as well. Mm-hmm. But I've also had others where they just would feel just disconnected if they were not at the same campus and not together. And so the one thing that I'll say is that if you're in that latter category and you know you want to go to the same school, it really behooves you to communicate this to the school. And in fact, colleges will respect it if you come right out and say, like, we see ourselves as a package deal. So if you're not going to accept one, then I'd rather you not accept both. Well, if we can't be together, I'd rather you not accept one.
I'm just not coming. Yeah.
From my experience, schools respect that because they're like, well, we're not going to yield the other one anyway, if that's what they're telling us.
Right.
And conversely, if you're really open to going to different schools, you really need to make that clear. In fact, when twins apply, that's the elephant in the room from the admission office standpoint, Anika. The elephant in the room is, do these students see themselves as a package deal, or are they open to going to different schools? And so you really need to communicate that, and it will be really appreciated. And I don't know if they still do this, but Brown used to ask this for twins, in their alumni interview. They used to do that. I'm not sure if they still do, but I remember when they did. And it's just different. Like when I did college admissions, we just decisioned independently, had nothing to do. Didn't really matter, like whether you're a twin or not. When I did boarding school admissions, we asked this question. We wanted to know, are you a package deal? Or are you open to coming independently?
Well, I guess now it makes more sense. Okay, now about the yield. Like, okay, we know that if we really want this other kid, it's not worth accepting if they're saying that, you got to take my other half. Or
yeah, and
that makes sense. Okay.
Yield is part of it. And the other thing is, if you're telling me you're not going to be happy, then why would we admit you even if we think you're going to come and you don't think you're going to be happy?
Okay.
So it's both a yield issue and sort of a happiness standpoint. I'll lay some principles down that I've observed over the years. The more competitive the school, the more likely they will judge individually. The smaller and more residential the school is, and especially women's colleges, they really work hard to keep the students together. If it's like two sisters,
okay.
Another thing I want to say about this: don't hesitate to ask a school how they treat twins in the application process. That is not an inappropriate question. Do they attempt to keep them together, or is it a non-factor? That's what I would ask. I wouldn't ask, is it your policy to absolutely keep twins together in all circumstances? Because very few schools absolutely have that policy because they just don't want to constrain themselves.
Right.
It's much more common to say they'll try to make it work if they can, but they'll decision individually. So that's why I would ask the question, like in the process for twins, do you try to keep twins together, or is it a non-factor in how you evaluate? That's how I would ask it. You could ask they have a policy on twins and see what they say. Now this might surprise you. For some schools, it's a hook being a twin.
To be a twin, really?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know what a hook is, think about a fish hook and how a hook gets on a fish. It's something that you get you get a little attachment into the school, and they want you more than they would a regular applicant. You get your hook in them. It can make you more attractive. Any idea why?
No.
So I always say this on the podcast: colleges want what they don't have. And anything, it's unique to have, especially identical twins. You know what I mean? People can learn from that. I mean, as they interact with the different twins, and anything that can enhance the learning environment for everybody else that you don't get that often can have a little bit of appeal. Things that are different have appeal. Unless you're Robin Banks, that's different. It's not going to work.
Not that.
Mugging people, carjacking. That's not what I'm talking about.
I never would have thought it would be a hook. I certainly wouldn't have.
Yeah, it actually can be. And in fact, so much so that some schools have set up like special twin financial perks.
Okay.
I'll list some. So like Randolph-Macon, you know, they give a 15% discount for twins. Sterling College in Kansas gives a 50% discount for twins.
What?
Yep. Cal Arbor State University in Oklahoma, they have a Apollo Nitro Twin Scholarship. Like somebody's a twin who probably, you know, gave the money and earmarked it, you know, for another twin.
Right.
George Washington in D.C., 50% discount for a second sibling.
That is very interesting.
Westchester University, they have their Bonnie Evans Feinberg Scholarship. Once again, I'm assuming, I don't know this for sure, but probably a twin that went to the school and endowed money for another twin.
Right.
And there's several of these that are out there. Wilson College in Pennsylvania, they do something really creative. You know, for every alternate year, one twin gets a discount, and then 45%, by the way, so pretty big. Kelly School of Business in Indiana, they've got an earmarked scholarship, the Leighton Fraser McKinley Scholarship. That has to be for identical, by the way. It has to be for identical twins in that case. And there's others, including Morris Brown here in Atlanta, Nika. They waive tuition for one twin if both of them are enrolled full time. And
that is so interesting.
And there's a few others, but I won't name them all. So, you know.
Yeah, but it's a thing.
Twin scholarships. Yeah, that some schools have out there. So great question. Love this question. This question we haven't had before.
Right.
And so, you know, got to give a shout out to Allison from Ohio for sending it in.
All right. Good luck, Allison.
Good luck, Allison, with those twins of yours, I'm assuming. You're thinking about yourself as a mom, I'm assuming. Who knows? You know? Awesome.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
All right, friends, in our final session, and I love this interview. I really hope you guys have had a chance to hear Julia's interview because I think she sheds light on one way you can really get to know the culture of these schools when you're trying to make decisions. And in the final segment, Julia talks about a second way you can get started with starting these Snapchat groups. She talks about some of the things she's learned about what some of the kids were like at some of the schools on her list that let her know that this is not the student culture she's looking for. And she found this process extremely helpful in identifying her top choice school. We close with me putting Julia on the hot seat. Listen and enjoy. And remember, Julia will tell you that she's more introverted, she's more diffident, she's more shy. So if she can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, it scares me to do things like that and reach out to other people and kind of be the first one to do that. But it's really rewarding and it's definitely worth it. A second route that you could go that we didn't really talk about, but it's a lot simpler than Zemi in my opinion, is that there are often like entering class group chats or entering class accounts on Instagram. So if you just search like Occidental Class of 2025, for example, there's an account that will pop up on Instagram where you can get to know people from there. You can like submit some pictures and a little bio and somebody will post it. But from there, there's often links to different chats where you can get to a Snapchat group chat as well. But that one just depends a bit more on the school. I would say the Zemi route, you're most likely to get to that end Snapchat Zoom situation.
Yeah, but I'm really glad you shared that other route because some people might be comfortable with that other route, especially if they're already like frequenting Instagram already and are familiar with those groups, where they just might be more comfortable. So I really thank you for sharing that.
It's worth doing both if you can figure it out. Sometimes it just takes some experimenting and all of that, but I would say just getting to know as many people as you possibly can has been really helpful.
Have you tried both approaches?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. Proven, tried, and true. So let me ask you this, Julia, and we won't mention specific names of other schools, but obviously when you indicate that Oxy students really stood out to you, then the converse of that is also true. I'm sure there are other schools where the kinds of kids that were attracted to them was not standing out. So without mentioning the names of the schools, can you just describe sort of maybe some characteristics maybe that you picked up to describe maybe some different cultures in some of the other chats that for schools that you didn't like as much as Oxy without mentioning the name of the college?
Yeah. So of course these preferences are very personal to me, but for example, some of the other schools were very Greek life focused. So almost all of the girls that I talked to were wanting to join a sorority, and that's just something that I'm not interested in and not really the community that I want to be in, I guess. There were some schools with a more partying vibe, which is also not something that I'm into. Schools that the students seemed very privileged and not very aware of the world around them, I guess. It was just clear that these students came from very privileged positions and kind of were interested in staying in that and not interested in really expanding their views. So those were kind of some of the main things that stood out to me that indicated that those schools might not be places that I wanted to be, as opposed to other schools like Oxy, or I also liked San Francisco a lot.
See, this is fantastic because I'm sure there's listeners that are thinking, wow, you were able to pick all that up by being in these Snapchat groups or being in these Zoom groups and just not even talking about the college, just seeing how people would talk about anything, whether it's life or entertainment or their family or their dog or vacations, in a casual environment. Not to mention identify some people that you would be interested in befriending, or at a minimum, when you get to campus, you could initially maybe go grab some food or hang out with as part of your initial transition. And so what an exciting way to peel back the curtain, peel back the onion, and really learn a lot about the culture of the school. So we're about to wind down here in a second. Anything you haven't shared yet that you want to share that you just think might be something important for our listeners to know?
I can't think of anything. I think we covered it all. I think it can just be a very informing and life-changing experience, I would say. Because like we talked about earlier, you just can't get this information about a school anywhere else besides actually personally interacting with the people that are going to the school. So I just cannot recommend enough trying that and how much it helped me.
Love it. So we're going to wind down. And as you know, nobody gets off coming to our podcast without getting on the hot seat. That's a rule. First time. The only way you get off is if you're a second-time guest. So that's the only time. But, so we'll start with you on the hot seat. So first of all, if you had $5,000 and you couldn't save it, you couldn't invest it, you couldn't use it to pay for college, you had to use it for something related to like entertainment or something that Julia likes to do, how and where would you spend that money?
That's a good question.
See, you thought the interview was hard. The hot seat's the hardest part.
Yeah, this is the hardest part. I think I would want to share it with other people. Our school's multicultural student union is a really close community, and we're all hoping to do some kind of more bonding activities, so maybe I could use some of that to get us all together, and because we're trying to do some things right now where we're all paying a smaller part of a bigger price. So it would be cool if I could pay that for everybody, or I really love to travel, so traveling anywhere would be incredible. There
you go. That's why you're good to be in the service professions with your servant spirit there. I love it, love it, love it. So let's talk about travel. Julia can go anywhere in the world. Money's not an issue. Where are you going?
Ooh, 2 places first come to mind. Denmark is the first one. I was going to go there last summer, but then they closed their borders because of COVID. So I have a friend there that I met. She was an exchange student in my high school a few years ago, and I haven't seen her in person since she went back home, so I would really want to go visit her. Otherwise, in college, I really want to do an exchange in a Spanish-speaking country and be able to learn about the culture and really immerse myself in the culture and language and become more fluent. So those 2 places are my top ones.
Awesome. All right. So somebody's never been to Wisconsin before, and they say, Julia, I'm coming to Wisconsin for the first time. Where do you recommend I go? What's the one place that you feel if you go to Wisconsin, you need to visit?
Wow. First of all, I would say bundle up. It's going to snow here today, a few inches. So no matter what time of year.
I was outside in shorts in 75, by the way, but it's okay.
I was outside in shorts 2 days ago, actually. We thought spring was coming, but then it changed its mind. So that's my first tip. Second of all, I might be biased, but I really love Madison. I think that it's very different from the rest of the state, but it has this very funky and just colorful vibe to it, is how I would describe it. There's just so much personality here. There's the campus and the lakes, which are really pretty. There's State Street, which has a lot of shops and you can't drive on the road. So it's a very active place all throughout the year. So that's what I would say is come to Madison. There are just so many cool things and experiences that I feel like are very unique to the area.
Yeah, one of the great college towns in the country, and a fantastic university. And why don't you share how far away Madison is from Oregon?
Just 20 minutes. So I'm just 20 minutes south of Madison, so I'm there almost every day. I work in Madison and go there for almost everything, so I'm there all the time. I'm really lucky to be that close too, and have had the opportunity to grow up on the Madison campus.
Love it. So Julia, you have an uncle and aunt, and they say, Julia, we're taking you out for graduation dinner, and question is, where will you pick? You have to pick a chained restaurant. You can't go to one of those little unique places in Madison that's like privately owned. You can go to any chain restaurant. Where are you picking?
That's a good question. I haven't gone to a lot of chained restaurants, but maybe I think Panera. They have really good bread, and I love bread and baguettes, and I think I would go there for their bread.
Awesome. I better have a good bread when you're named Panera Bread.
Yeah.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Friends, I wish I could remember which of our listeners sent me the website I'm about to share with you, because I'd give them a huge shout out. But the website is our recommended resource for episode 168, and it's Transferology.com. A few weeks ago, after this listener sent this in and said, Mark, really encourage you to share this with the listeners, I was actually talking to a transfer specialist admissions counselor at a Midwestern university, and he told me about how fantastic this website is. And this is an admission officer with 30 years experience in admissions. Now, earlier in this episode, Anika and I talked about the concern we have about losing credits when you transfer. And this is exactly what Transferology helps you out with. So what does Transferology.com do? Well, you simply enter your courses to find equivalent courses at other schools. It matches and ranks by awarded credit so you can eliminate the guesswork and you can maximize your transfer potential. There are also school profiles, which offer quick access to program information such as tuition, fees, costs, school size, that sort of information. And you can also actually even set up a campus visit just with the click of a button right from their website. Do you need to pick up a few extra credit hours? No problem. Are you looking to take some courses at another school over the summer? Transferology will do the heavy lifting for you by figuring out if the credits are going to transfer back. The website is Transferology.com, and it's a must-check resource if you're thinking about transferring. Now, before we return to the final part of my interview with Julia, I have a big announcement to make. Julia is going to talk about Occidental College and how it stood out to her above all the other schools, and she's going to explain why. And since our last episode, Julia not only was admitted with a presidential scholarship. So shout out to Julia for the success and how she navigated herself through this college admissions process. You and my oldest daughter get along very well. She's all about Spanish and she's all about Panera. Yes. And I always make her happy by giving her a Panera gift card.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a no-lose gift, All right, Julia, tell us about a book you've read that's impacted your life.
Okay, my favorite book that I've read is called The Queen of Water. by Laura Rissau and Maria Virginia Farinango. And it's based on a true story of a girl that grows up in South America. She's indigenous and in the lower working class. And part of the story is very heavy. This little girl is taken as a slave in a house of someone that's much higher class, but through it you learn about different racial and ethnic tensions in other countries and how those impact the lives of indigenous people, which is something that I never knew. You really learn how colonization impacted these social structures and how these certain types of people and people from different ethnicities are today. The end of the book is really uplifting and inspiring. This girl ends up making a huge difference in her community and uplifting other girls who have been in the same situation as her. And the last page just always gives me goosebumps when I read it. It's just really beautiful.
So you know what I'm doing now as soon as this interview's over?
What?
Going on Amazon and buying this for my youngest daughter, Joy.
Good.
She is like all of a sudden just obsessed with anything to do with Native American culture.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is like Native American culture in South America, so it's really cool.
Well, and our family roots are in South America on my dad's side with Native American culture.
Oh,
and
wow.
so, yeah, and so she found out recently, like there was like an Indian component in the culture, so she's like literally going bonkers. So I have to buy this book as soon as we hang up, right to Amazon, shoot it right off to UGA, and she'll be all in. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. Last question for you. There are parents out there listening. We have college counselors listening. Those are our biggest two groups. And then some real, of the 4.0 type students sometimes listen to. But there's a lot of things that you guys can do with your time besides listen to a college admissions podcast, and I get it. But for the parents, college counselors, students who are listening, what's your advice to them?
I would say that my biggest piece of advice is just to really stay open and learn about yourself in the process. I think that that is the biggest lesson that I have learned from the whole college admissions process, from search to actually applying to working on making decisions, is I've learned so much about myself and also been able to see myself grow. Kind of like we talked about earlier when we first started meeting, I had very different ideas of what I wanted in a school than what I do now. I wanted a really big school. I didn't want it to be very personal, and I didn't want to know everybody that I walked past on campus. All of these things, I had very different ideas of what I wanted, and by being open to people's advice, I was really able to kind of find myself in the process and learn about who I am and what I value. And if I had never listened to your advice about giving Oxy a try, even because of the size or anything like that, I just would have ended up in a very different place. And even when applying to schools, writing some of the essays or some of those short answer questions about why I'm interested in the school, it really helped me learn through the process of researching and writing those what I wanted and really gave me direction. So I would say my biggest advice is being open to different opportunities and things presented, but also being aware of what you're learning about yourself through the process.
Oh, that's deep. I love it. Be aware about what you're learning about yourself through the process and be open-minded to things you maybe didn't think you would be interested in. That's a drop the mic moment. So we're going to stop right there. But I can't thank you enough, Julia, for coming on today. And I know this is going to help a lot of people. And I'm supposed to be at Oxy in December. There's a program called December Fest where they fly in a bunch of counselors and show us around.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like 9 California schools in 7 days. And Oxy's on the list. So I hope to see you there then.
Yeah, maybe I'll get to meet you in person. That would be exciting.
Yeah, you're one of the people I feel like I know from all these Zoom meetings. We've been meeting for like about a year and a half, but
yeah,
it's great. I'll look forward to that. And thank you again. This has really been awesome.
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have more people know about this.
My pleasure. Now it's time for our college spotlight of the week. College spotlight today, and we're going straight to Waco, Texas, to talk about the recently crowned NCAA championship, Baylor University.
And a runaway.
And so, I'm going to start with the mission statement because it'll explain a lot about Baylor. And for all of you, study the mission statements. So here's Baylor. The mission of Baylor University is to educate men and women for worldwide leadership and service by integrating academic excellence and Christian commitment within a caring community. So, Dave, I think this is our 73rd spotlight. I don't think we've had a Christian school before, but we have one of the largest private universities in the country in Baylor, which a lot of people don't know that, and it also happens to be a Christian school. So, little diversity to our list. So, a little bit of the history about Baylor. In 1841, 35 delegates to the Union Baptist Association had a meeting with the Reverend William Milton Tryon and District Judge R.E.B. Baylor to establish a Baptist university in Texas. And Baylor is actually 175 years old, so it's been around for a while.
Wow.
Now, it founded in Independence, Texas in 1841, literally 10 months before the state of Texas became a state. So Baylor's been around before Texas was a state. But then in 1886, it moved to its current location in Waco, combining two schools, former Baylor University with Waco. And from its humble beginnings, it has now moved on to a place that educates over 16,000 students, making it one of the largest private universities in the country. And I'm going to read to you some actual statements from Baylor's websites just so you can see how they themselves claim to be Christian. So this is what it says. These are exciting times in the life of the university, a period in which our institution is striving to maintain both relevance of higher learning in the coming years and to continue our original mission laid down by our founders to be a Christian university, fully susceptible of enlargement and development to the needs of all ages to come. In the world where faith is often the casualty of the serious pursuit of academic achievement. And then it says, Baylor University is a private Christian university and nationally ranked liberal arts institution. And from our rank, we include alumni, missionaries, pastors, heads of Fortune 500 companies, governors of Texas, professional athletes. Baylor is the oldest continually operated university in the state. It's another thing people don't know. It's the oldest school in the state of Texas. So I want you to see how unapologetically they came to be Christian. And you'll see this sort of Christian worldview throughout Baylor. For example, all students have to take 2 religion classes. All students have to take 2 semesters of chapel. All students have to take a series of lectures and meetings on various aspects of faith and Christian service. Alcohol is not served on campus at all, nor is alcohol allowed at any campus-related sponsored events. So that's Baylor. Now, it's one of the first educational institutions ever to be west of the Mississippi. There are not that many schools that were founded before Baylor west of the Mississippi. And it happens to be the largest Baptist university in the world with over 1,000 square miles of land.
Wait, 1,000 square miles or square acres?
Sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, 1,000 square acres. Thanks, Dave. Caught me, man. Good catch, my friend.
That's okay.
You're on your game. See, I just threw that in to see if you were listening, man.
Well, I could buy it because, this is Texas after all. They
Yeah,
in a
that's
big
true.
way.
Everything's big. I just had a flashback to getting this chicken fried steak once. I lived in Texas for 7.5 years. And the thing could have fed 4 people. It was so big on a huge Texas plate. Typical Texas. Everything's big.
That's right.
So Baylor's located almost equidistant between Dallas and Austin in a place called Waco, which has a population of around 140,000, about 250 if you count the suburbs there. Let me tell you one thing about Baylor. This is a place with a lot of spirit, a lot of energy, huge school spirit. If you like face painting and zeal and getting revved up, Thursday for game day, Baylor is your place. You probably already know that Texas is the king of football. So football reigns supreme at all Texas schools. So there's basically almost a shrine there for RG3. Dave, remember him? Robert Griffin III?
I sure do. Man, he had a great rookie year. He was felled, unfortunately, by injuries. He was just a little too small to do the Cam Newton deal. And that even felled Cam Newton. But we're getting off on a digression.
Yeah, but he was a Heisman Trophy winner.
Yes,
and
he was. RG3.
Incredible star at Baylor.
Went to Washington.
Yep. Early part of the NFL. Dave's an NFL guy, as you can see.
Yeah,
so some more things about he still plays. Yep. Some more things. Huge school spirit. I mean, it really brings the community together. Really unites the student body with passion. And I don't minimize that because I had that at Michigan State and I absolutely loved it. It's one reason why I chose to go there. And it was one reason why it was the 4 funnest years of my life. So I don't poo-poo that as some anti-intellectual thing. That's, to me, can be a really important part of work-life balance if you like sports and if you want just a real good, clean, fun outlet. So listen, Baylor has some really cool traditions. One of them is the Baylor line. And what happens here is all the freshmen that wear Baylor colors and they form a line. Like, Dave, when the players come out of the tunnel, the football players for a game.
Yeah.
And they run through the line with all the freshman students. And then after they run through the line, the freshman students sprint into a section of the stands where they all seat and they give them really good seats right behind the visitors' bench. They figure these new rabid freshmen are going to come in and they're going to wreak havoc on the visitors. So they give them great seats. So that's a tradition called the Baylor line. They have some other traditions. The Baylor Tower lights up green after a Baylor win. Christmas, they take over 5th Street and go to 5th Street for this huge celebration. And then they have this really cool tradition called the Dr. Pepper Hour. And I never studied the history on that. I don't know if the founder went to Baylor or not. Probably did, but I don't know that for sure. But Dr. Pepper Hour, you go over to student services and you get your Dr. Pepper and it's mixed with ice cream and they create a float for you. And every Tuesday between 3 to 5, you get a free Dr. Pepper float. And they throw in some other things that I've never tried it, but apparently it tastes amazing.
Let's just say that
it's not whiskey, Dave.
If this was UC San Diego, they wouldn't be mixing the Dr. Pepper with ice cream.
Well, if it's Dave, he might have whiskey.
Now we know it's a Christian university. Woo! Dr. Pepper and ice
really
cream.
Risky.
Be still, my beating heart. We're going to party tonight.
Good point. Another interesting fun fact. Homecoming was founded at Baylor University in 1909. That's the origin of homecoming. It started there, and they take homecoming seriously. They have one of the largest homecoming parades in the country that almost looks like a Rose Bowl parade. They work on these floats for months, and the whole community comes together for the big homecoming. Almost all athletic events are free. Same for plays, same for musicals. It's a real work hard, play hard environment. And Dave, do you know the nickname of Baylor?
Bulldogs? No.
No, man. Did you watch the championship game?
I didn't. I just got the highlights. What
Baylor Bears.
Oh, the Bears. That's right. The Bears. That's cool. I'm a Chicago guy. That's a good nickname.
Yeah, you can relate to that. You are a Chicago guy. You like that.
That's right.
Their mascot is a black bear, and it seems like everything at Baylor has the name Bear on it. Their jogging path is called the Bear Trail. Their campus aerobics is called the Bear Fitness. And then they have something called a Day of the Bear. And this is just before finals. When I told you this place has a lot of school spirit. It's a fun place to go to school. Just before finals, classes are canceled. And they have this day where they have games. They have food. They have music. They have sports competitions. And it's just this active live time. Everybody's out dancing before you have to go in and do finals. And it's called the Day of the Bear.
I got to say, that's what I love about Texas. They stick to apex predators as their mascots. No more hokey birds or maroons or just give me something big that eats a lot of people. We like the Bears.
Well, they actually have live black bears on campus that are growing. They brought them in young. Now they're up over 300 pounds. And it's actually the number one place visitors visit to go see the live black bears. It's like a little mini zoo. So they take their bears seriously.
That's so Texas.
Unfortunately, they take the sports a little too seriously. In 2016, they had one of the worst scandals in college history when it came to sports. Dozens of sexual assault committed by many football players. But what made this thing such a travesty is that the head football coach and the administration covered it up and actively worked against the investigations. So it ended up resulting in the head coach being fired. Ken Starr, yes, that's the same Ken Starr of Clinton impeachment, who was the president at the time, was fired. And many thought that they would get the death penalty, meaning banned for long periods of time, for decades. But the NCAA let them off light, and sports have never been stronger. Football success is back, and obviously we know their basketball championship they won last week was the first time Texas had won one in 55 years. So sports have never been stronger. By the way, I need to do a segment at some point, Dave, on how applications soar after a school has athletic success in a major sport.
Alabama, man. Yeah.
Well, not just Alabama. Clemson. I mean, I've had more people ask me about Clemson in the last year and a half than in my first 20 years doing this. Villanova. Do you know Villanova? Like 10 years ago, Villanova was taking B students. Now Villanova's 25th to 75th SAT, Dave, is 1,400 to 1,500.
Well,
Gonzaga.
Go back to USC. Remember when they had that 3 NCAA football championship run under Pete Carroll?
Pete Carroll.
Yeah. That's the sky. I mean, O.J. Simpson, the O.J. Simpson era and the Pete Carroll era. And I remember they had the skyrocketing profile. And University of Miami, although Donna Shalala sort of tore down the stadium and wrecked that.
But Dave, Georgetown in the 80s? Georgetown,
yeah,
and Duke too. Duke wasn't what Duke was now before the basketball success.
Completely, absolutely, yeah.
And I'll tell you something else. This will surprise people. When I was at Stanford for a counselor certification program I went through at Stanford, I had a long conversation with their admission officers, and she was like, "Mark, Stanford wasn't as well known as it is now, 15 years ago." And she said, "You want to know two of the major reasons why?" She said, Tiger Woods, Andrew Luck, and Chelsea Clinton. Because at the time, Chelsea Clinton had gone to Sidwell Friends, and everybody kind of went from Sidwell Friends to the East Coast schools, but she turned down all the East Coast schools to go to Stanford. And so she was making the point that's a celebrity, which is why the way they have built-in lobbyists for celebrity kids, right? You get the publicity. We talked about that earlier, and why they have built-in lobbyists for athletes. Because look at basically she's saying we're still reaping the benefits now of Chelsea Clinton, Tiger Woods, and Andrew Luck coming to Stanford in terms of our appeal. And we have way more students now that turn down Harvard, Princeton, and Yale to go to Stanford than we did before. And so, once again, schools aren't stupid. This is why they have built-in lobbyists for celebrity kids and athletes, because it helps their institution.
We're a celebrity culture, man.
Yep, absolutely. So back to Baylor. So once again, Baylor, conservative Christian campus. So this won't surprise you. All dorms are single sex, single gender, no co-ed dorms, co-ed floors, any of that kind of stuff. They have some pretty strict limitations on the opposite sex being able to visit you in your dorm as well. So, you don't have to be a professing Christian to go there. So it's actually quite controversial. A lot of students don't like this policy at all, and they just move off campus so they can just do their thing. The birds and the bees will still be the birds and the bees.
You can't trust these kids commingling, Mark, once they get off that Dr. Pepper ice cream sugar high. Their judgment will just go straight out the window.
Dave's not going to forget the Dr. Pepper and ice cream. Dr. Pepper hour. Now, when it comes to applying to Baylor, 3 ways. Common application. You can apply directly on the Baylor website, and then something which anybody from Texas will be familiar with is called the Apply Texas app. You go and you create your Go Baylor account. They've got 2 deadlines, November 1st and February 1st. They've got both early action and early decision. And they're doing what a lot of schools are doing. They're adding a second round of early decision too. And once again, when you see schools adding a second round of early decision too, that just tells you how important demonstrated interest is, because it's kind of a hassle to have to add a whole different round of admissions. But you only do that because it's that valuable for you to lock kids in and not have to compete for kids that you want. So so second round of ED2 is relatively new. Now, one thing they do, which I wish everybody would do, Dave, and I commend them for this, no application fee. Nobody pays an application fee to apply to Baylor. So no app fee. You do have to submit an official transcript freshman through junior year. They'll make decisions on you very early in the senior year without seeing senior grades, like a lot of schools do. They do have a required essay from the Common App as well as on the Applied Texas app. Like a lot of schools that went test optional this year, we'll see whether they continue test optional. They've kind of indicated that they do like test scores, though, so I strongly encourage you to submit scores if you have strong scores. I think they're still adjusting to reading test optional. They like resumes. They encourage you to submit a resume. Not everybody does. They like resumes, and they like to see 2 recommendations, although they don't require them. And they would like one to be from a teacher, and they like getting one from an outside person. Outside could be an employer, could be you're involved in Girl Scouts or you're actively involved in your church, youth pastor, something like that. They like to get an outside rec, and a teacher rec would be ideal, but they don't mandate to you what the 2 recs have to be. And they do have a short answer question. It's the why Baylor question. Now, this is a school that's really big on merit scholarship, so oftentimes I will put this school on people's lists that can't afford sticker price, and they're looking for a real good bargain educationally. So they give a lot of merit money away. They have an invitation for excellence program that is really good, that extends to a lot of people. They have some really unique programs. They have a Baylor to Baylor medicine program, Baylor to Baylor law program, where they actually offer acceptance right into grad school in some of these programs. They have a very ambitious strategic plan that involves some real significant campus upgrades. And this is a wealthy school. I mean, they have a hefty $1.3 billion endowment. It's the largest endowment amongst any Baptist school in the world. And they've got some special programs for serious students. So if you're a serious student, you definitely want to go into their honors college, particularly their honors residential college. That's where you'll find a community of scholars. Pretty big difference between the honors college student and those outside when it comes to intellectual curiosity, academic culture from students I've worked with. They will say definitely the really focused academic kids, you'll find them in the honors college. Now, Waco is not Dallas, Houston, Austin, or even San Antonio. So students I've had go to Baylor, they haven't necessarily given Waco the highest marks. And it's not the most diverse school. Neither politically, it's pretty Republican, white, conservative, Christian in terms of its demographics. And it is a place where social life really revolves around fraternities and sororities pretty heavily. Some of the strongest programs, they have some very strong programs all the way up through the doctoral level. I'll mention some of their strongest programs, Dave, and then I'll ask you for some feedback. So electrical engineering is strong. Speech pathology is strong. They've got a doctorate in physical therapy that's very strong. Accounting, healthcare management is a strong program. Biology, arguably their strongest program comes in the Hancomer School of Undergraduate Business. They've won many awards for their innovation. And arguably their top major is their entrepreneurship major. They have a special center called the John F. Baugh Center for Entrepreneurship, and it's like ranked really high in all those rankings when it's like top schools for entrepreneurship. Environmental science, really strong program. Chemistry. They've got an executive MBA that has a great reputation. And their law school has an excellent reputation, particularly for trial advocacy. That's their specialty, trial advocacy. They've got a very strong MBA that focuses on healthcare administration. That's your area, Dave.
Yes.
Didn't you do that kind of with your executive MBA at Northwestern?
Yes, I did. So it was a good program.
Yep, healthcare administration. And then their doctor of nursing gets really great marks as well. They've got a strong nursing midwifery program. It's a school that does a lot of research. It's got huge center dedicated to research, and students get involved in research. Got a Doctor of Neuroscience program that's got a great reputation. And overall, the Masters of Public Health and the School of Social Work, very reputable.
Does it have a medical school associated with it as well?
Very strong medical school.
Yeah, so I know it's got a very strong pre-medical program.
Correct. Yeah. A lot of things related to medicine are strong at Baylor. Nursing, public health, neuroscience, different things. And this won't surprise you. Truett Seminary is located right on the campus. I'll just say a few more things here, Dave, and then I'll ask you for some feedback. So one thing that grabs you about Baylor is the stunning campus. It runs right along the Brazos River. So if you're a water lover like me, you've got these breathtaking water views. And I mean, there are trees everywhere and this beautiful brick architecture that just grabs you. So it's quite a stunning campus. Very impressive. I think you can make a really good case. It's one of the more beautiful campuses in the country. And then they've got a really nice program I like called the University Scholars Program. And this program, what happens is you get a BA degree, and it allows talented students basically to create their own personalized educational journey. So it's like a interdisciplinary program where basically you create your own majors. You work with faculty advisors and mentors and design your own interdisciplinary major that combines liberal arts and sciences. So it's for some highly motivated, strong academic kids. Most of those really strong academic kids will either go into the honors college or do the University Scholars Program. And they do have a strong honors college. It's definitely one of the strengths of the school. Then they have this other program called Great Texts. And this is a unique program. It offers both a major and a minor, and it gives students practical skills through life-changing encounters. So you study the foundational works of literature, philosophy, theology. It's all seminar-style teaching. You study fine arts. You study history. And it's kind of something that people do as a basis because they want to go into something pre-professional. So most of the people that do that Great Text program, they go on to study medicine, law, ministry, education, or graduate school. So there you have it, Dave. Tell me what stood out to you, and then I'll share the stats, and we'll call it a day.
Baylor's a great school. I mean, I didn't know it was as strong as in basketball. It's usually known most for its football prowess, so I'm sure this championship is going to add to its general appeal. But it's always been known as having very strong medical-related programs, and you pointed that out, not just in medicine, but in nursing. It actually is a party school. I had forgotten that it was a Baptist school, and I actually thought it was more of a pre-party school that was probably related to the university. So I am looking forward to finding their recipe for the Dr. Pepper ice cream float. That was the big novelty for me. I love their mascot, a good old-fashioned bear. You can never go wrong with the bear. And actually, Waco, Texas is it had that whole Branch Davidian,
Sure did.
You're in the backwoods impression a couple decades ago. But you know who's actually changed the impression of Waco? Chip and Joanna Gaines. So maybe when you go down there, you could visit the Magnolia Center. My wife watches that program a lot. But it's a very solid school, and I think the nice thing about Waco is it is bifurcated, where it's not incredibly tough to get in, but it has that honors college, which is sort of a cut above that you can really focus on the academics if you choose to do so, and its business program is quite competitive as well. So very solid school.
Yeah, I mean, it's a place where you can have a lot of fun and still get a really good education, particularly if you're comfortable with the Christian philosophy, Christian worldview that things are going to be coming from. And that's one of those things that some of the students I work with love it, and some wouldn't be caught dead there.
Yes, let's just say that I don't expect them to be giving Little Nas an honorary degree anytime soon.
Who's that? Is that a rapper?
We'll talk about it later.
Okay.
He's this rapper that did Old Town Road. So I thought that he's a young African-American kid. And so I was like, and he got the Country Music Award which was really revolutionary. But it turns out that he's gay, and he's got this video out where he does a lap dance with Satan and so forth. I won't go into the details.
Okay.
Let's just
he's not getting any honorary doctorate.
He's not getting any honorary degrees from Waco, Texas.
And I need to get up. I need to get up on my rap, called knowledge culture or whatever.
Exactly. I was actually just demonstrating that even at my age, I keep in tune with the cultural relevance.
I'll ask Lauren that. I think she might disagree. It's all relative.
Actually, the only reason I do know about this is because Lauren was filling me in.
See, there you go. All right, let's go. Let's do stats and call it a day. So 65% of undergrads are from Texas. 26% are Baptist. 3% are international. African-American, 6%. Hispanic, 16. Asian, 7. Multiracial, 5.
What percentage is African-American?
6%.
Okay, that's not bad.
I think that if you are at Baylor or visit Baylor, I don't necessarily know if it feels as diverse as those numbers indicate. So I don't know if there's, I'll just leave it at that. I don't say anymore. 20% of Baylor men and 34% of women belong to a fraternity or sorority. Total enrollment, 16,144. Undergrads, 13,959. 40% male, 60% female. Middle evidence-based reading and writing scores, meaning 25th to 75th%, 600 to 680. And math, 590 to 690. ACT, middle scores, 26 to 31. So once again, 25% would have higher than a 31. 25% would have under 26. So pretty competitive applicant they're taking, significantly higher than the national average when it comes to things like testing. 22% Pell Grant. I'll give them credit. That's higher than most private schools. So they are showing some good socioeconomic diversity there compared to most private schools with that number. Some other information that may be of interest to our listeners. 35,000 applicants, 52% acceptance rate, and a 19% yield. So about 1 in 5 that get admitted enroll. 79% 6-year graduation rate, 89% freshman retention rate. And Dave, want to take a guess at the overlaps?
Oh, Baylor. Okay, I can figure this out. Okay, you're in Texas. You're in Waco. It's got to be some of the UT schools, maybe UT Austin. It's also,
that's one of them. Let's see how many you can get out of the top 5. So you're 1 for 1. UT Austin.
Texas A&M.
Yep, 2 for 2.
Texas A&M. Okay, going down. Okay, come on, Dallas and Houston. I'm not sure if University of Houston would be an overlap with them.
That's a good guess, but it didn't make it as in top 5. But that is a good guess.
Okay, and looking around, I'm not sure if their overlaps would be in Florida or. Okay,
there's a big one you're missing.
Wait. It's Baylor.
I'm going to do a spotlight on it. It's in Fort Worth.
Oh.
Maybe you don't. You may not be familiar with it. Want me to tell you?
Yeah, go tell you.
Texas Christian University, TCU.
Oh, gee. I wouldn't have guessed that. But now that you say Texas Christian, let me guess. It must be.
So TCU's in the Big 12. So one thing I should say, they're in the Big 12 conference with UT Austin, with TCU, with SMU.
Yeah. And that's Southern Methodist was actually,
no, surprisingly, it's not one of the Big 5. The others are. Did you say you said Texas and
Texas A&M?
You said Texas and Texas A&M.
Yeah.
So Texas Tech, another Big 12 school.
Makes sense.
TCU, another Big 12 school, and then the University of Oklahoma, which is not Norman is not that far from the Texas border. So those are the Big 5.
Okay.
As far as overlaps. Awesome, Dave. Well, this was fun. It was fun talking about all those rich private schools and where they're off kilter and where they're misunderstood. I've enjoyed this in Baylor, and I'm never going to forget the floats. Floats with the root beer,
float, man. Yeah, when I come down to Atlanta, man, we are going to get ourselves a happy hour. I hop into your hot tub. Mark's got a hot tub. He's redoing his old backyard. He's got a special place for me under the shade and my special chair, and we're going to be getting high on our Dr. Pepper and ice cream floats, man.
I'm glad you added that. I'm glad you didn't stop at getting high. Gee. Do you have another word for that?
Hey, sugar high is the best high there is, man.
Okay. All right, as long as you stipulate. All right, my friend. You enjoy the rest of your day.
Next week in the news, poll. Nearly half of parents don't want their kids to go straight to a 4-year college. Great article in the Hechinger Report. Mark and Anika will discuss why is it so important to utilize my advisor and their knowledge. Our question from a listener is, how can my child demonstrate his level of commitment to a single activity to explain his lack of commitment to others? Our interview is a familiar name coming back to the podcast. It's part 1 of a 4-part series by Mark Kantrowitz, and it's on understanding the new simplified FAFSA. And there'll be no college spotlight next week.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please subscribe so you get every episode as soon as it is released. If you are interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. And you can write a review for us on your favorite podcast listening app. I am the producer of the Your College Bound Kid podcast. We have a fantastic team of 9 people. Shout out to our 3 co-hosts, Anika Madden, Dr. David Williams, and Dr. Lisa Ruff. Our sound engineer, who fixes all of our many errors, is Nemanja Montfitch. The amazing music you hear is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Our image editor is Talha Khan, and our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitri. If you want to have a college coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want to ask, or a college you want Lisa or me to do a spotlight on, or if you have a recommended resource or an article you think we should share, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. By the way, check out our website where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you, our family, next week.